Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Forgot to hit it earlier, but that should be good to.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. And then do you want to flip it over to share screen?
Yep, just.
Sure. So Frank asked me to present today about our youth climate program, and then specifically about the work that we're doing right now with New York State Office of Climate Change, and how we're working with young people to lead on climate change in New York State. So I don't know that we'll take I definitely won't take the entire time in presenting about this, but I hope that we can have a rich discussion at the end of the conversation. And I had some questions that I'd love to put out to the group. I know many of you have heard me talk about this program before, and we have some of our partners on the phone, like Alliance for Climate Education and certainly NOAA's Climate Office. But I'm going to do a brief overview of where our program is and our Youth Climate Summit piece. And then I'm going to talk more specifically about how we are working with the New York State Office of Climate Change and how youth are partners with New York State and kind of shifting the way communities are thinking about climate resilience. So that's what I'm going to focus on. But just to take a quick step back. So the Wild Center's Youth Climate Program has been in existence now for about 10 years. We're based at the Wild Center, which is a science museum in upstate New York in the Adirondack Park. And so in this image, you see the outline of the park. So it's a 6 million acre state park. It's a patchwork of public and private land. It's a biosphere reserve. There's about 135,000 people that live within the Adirondacks. It's very rural. The biggest community is about 5,000 people. And the community where our science museum is located is the town of Tupper Lake, and we're about 2,500 people. So I'm just giving you a little bit of context. It tends to be a more conservative part of New York State. And so anyway, just giving you a little context on the environment from which we operate. We are, as I mentioned, a state park, but we're really quite unique as we have people living inside the park, and it's this patchwork of public and private land. It's pretty rugged and mountainous, and we are really, our economy is really based on tourism primarily, and each year, we get between 9 and 11 million visitors that come to the Adirondacks, mostly around like sort of recreation and sightseeing. The outdoor industry is really big. We also, particularly in the wintertime, we have a pretty thriving skiing, snowmobiling, ice fishing. So winter tourism is also a big piece of our larger economy, and that's an important context and framing for this conversation. Our science museum is a little over 10 years old. This is one shot of it. We're roughly 115 acres along the Racket River, which is the second largest river in New York State. And we are a silver LEED building, so we really try to walk the talk around climate change and think about sustainability in everything that we do as a science center, and also think about, again, in this other context, that like how museums can be relevant in the 21st century, and how they can still be a place for convening, a hub for climate resilience, thinking about the intersection where science and society meet. So especially in a region that is, well, it can be anywhere, but in an area that's really remote, we're the only science provider outside of the school system, or kind of around. So we intersect with a lot of young people, a lot of teachers throughout our region. So our youth climate program also began about 10 years ago. We are about to have our 10th Adirondack Youth Climate Summit coming up on November 7th and 8th, where we bring together about 200 youth from 30 to 35 different school districts from around, mostly in the Adirondacks, but we're now seeing more and more throughout the state. So this is the center of the our science museum. We do a total museum takeover. We like close the museum to the public. The kids are everywhere. They're in front of our aquariums or in front of, they might be sitting next to an otter at lunchtime. Like they, so we really do a full takeover. And they come, as I said, from all over the place in New York State. So oftentimes schools might travel 3 or 4 hours to come to our event, which is 2 days. So the Youth Climate Summit itself is focused on a number of different things. So one is we really think about the strong climate science content, not both in a global perspective, but also in a local impact. So understanding like what's happening both at the global and local scale is really critical. So it's really grounded in sort of that place-based approach. We really try to focus on it being youth-driven. So we've had youth from the very beginning that are involved in all aspects of the program, from all the planning and organizing and coordinating of the summit to going out and connecting in communities afterwards, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. We currently have a youth advisory board that we launched in January that helped to shape and form the program. And we really, in the summit and throughout the whole project, really think about how young people can be at the center of the conversation, and it's been like that for the very beginning. So during our summits, which are our Adirondack Youth Climate Summit, which is a 2-day event, we bring in all types of speakers, and we really try to highlight young people as being part of the solution and also make solutions visible. So we're very youth focused, and we've had, just to acknowledge, that the Alliance for Climate Education has been a great partner for at least, I think, 5 years now, and bringing their programming and their energy to our summits and making them really successful, and also helping us think about youth leadership and social and climate justice as major themes. A big part of our Youth Climate Summit, in addition to all the workshops and the networking and opportunities for young people to really put their voice forward, is climate action planning. So we really, as part of this, create a framework that helps student teams to think about actions that they can take in their schools and communities to work towards climate resilience, to think about how they can make concrete changes, how they can be leaders. So that leadership piece comes in. Oftentimes it's framed within the context of like service learning or community-based learning and project-based learning. So there's a lot of opportunities in there to kind of think about their project through a lot of different lenses, and the students are really driving this. So one of the things that we decided early on as a science center is that we were going to not be in the habit of standing up there and saying, you should do this, you should do that, you have to do this. It doesn't really work for working, especially with young people, teenagers. That's not what they want to hear. They want to be part of that conversation, and they want to drive the work that they're going to do. And we just try to help provide support and framing and resources for them to get to where they want to be. Okay. So having students empowered by local actions. At our summit, we, as I mentioned before, we have 30 to 35 teams of students. So those teams come in groups of 5 to 6. And so school teams work on that climate action plan at the summit. It's a big part of our second day. And then they bring that back to their schools. We also help to support and provide mini grants, anywhere from $100 to $1,000, to help them implement projects in their schools. And those projects are all different things. I mean, we've had solar powered recharging stations, school gardens, greenhouses, events, like big community awareness days, e-recycling, waste management. So this student here is doing partnered with a local waste management company to look at food waste. And so he was doing this whole his senior project around this for the Lake Placid School District. So we really try to get students involved outside of in their communities, partnering with local businesses, thinking about that project-based learning from start to finish. So that's been a really big part of this, and I think one of the most important secrets to the recipe on engaging young people on climate change is taking that knowledge and understanding and actually building in those action competencies so they can experience success and they have the opportunity to learn those skills necessary to manage a project from start to finish, to learn about what all parts of that, but then also to be able to lead and share those successes in lots of different ways with lots of different audiences. So just to take a step back, so as I mentioned, we've been doing this for 10 years. Last year in New York State, we had 11 youth climate summits. We were up from 5 the previous year, and we have more coming online all the time. There's at least 3 other communities in New York State right now that are thinking about doing climate summits. And we've also done a little over 50 summits in 30 different sites around the world. And again, we have a lot of interest from a lot of new places coming into 2019. So we've been really excited about this. We primarily disseminate that summit model concept through an online free toolkit that you can download. And I'm happy to share that information with you if you're interested. So,
Jen, I don't
sure,
interrupt you, but the maps that you're showing, are they available online?
The maps I just showed you, I don't think are available online.
Okay.
No.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to ask that one because, whoa, look at these ones. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but I'm happy to share those with you, Jim, if you want.
Okay.
If you want copies of them, I'm just pulling them off our
especially when they're
database.
interactive, where you can click up and saying, okay, what's going on in Africa? That's cool.
Yes,
yeah.
well, that's the intent of getting there, getting to that point. Now to dive back in, so that's been our work over the last close to 10 years now. And last October, we were really fortunate to get funding from NOAA's Environmental Literacy Grants Program to do a deeper dive in New York State. And this is where I'm going with this, is how we've been partnering with the Office of Climate Change. So in our NOAA project, we're working with a whole pile of different partners, including the Alliance for Climate Education, Cornell University of Delaware County, Cooperative Extension, Kurt Hahn, based in Brooklyn, which is an expeditionary learning school. We're also now working with New York City Outward Bound. And then in addition to that, we're working with the Office of Climate Change in New York State, which is part of New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation. There's about 8 people, I believe, 8 or 9 people in that office that's based in Albany, New York, which is kind of in the center of the state. If you can see my cursor, it's right there. And then we are also working with NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which is like a state-funded, like a contractor that does energy work in New York State. So those partners, so this ability with our NOAA project to do a deeper dive into these different regions and think about how we can work with New York State and youth and teachers in these spaces is where we're sitting right now. So over the past year, we've been doing youth climate summits in each of these 3 regions of New York State. So, and over the course of the grant, we'll be doing 2 youth summits in each of those sites. We're doing teacher climate institutes in each of those sites. So how we work and connect with teachers. We're also doing very intentional youth leadership development, and that's happening in a variety of different ways. This past summer, we hosted 2 3-day youth climate leadership retreats that were held up here in the Adirondacks, where we brought students in from all 3 sites to work together and think about what it's like to be, what it means to be a leader on climate change, why they're connected to this issue, and some of the different lenses to think about this issue through, like for instance, social and climate justice. So that's been very powerful. We're going to continue to do those retreats as we move forward within these different areas. So I'm actually going to share out now. We started working with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They have a program called Climate Smart Communities. And these are actually the slides, I'm sharing your slides, from Dazzle Ekblad, who is one of the, this is the state coordinator for Climate Smart Communities. And she's going to be presenting this at that Drawdown Learn workshop that's happening this coming weekend. So this is like a preview. I'm sharing a few of her slides so you can see how how New York State is actually framing and talking about working with us. So I thought this would kind of be a different way to be thinking about this idea of youth at the center and how we're working with New York State for them to see youth differently. So it's like two different concepts. Does that make sense? And if anybody has questions as I'm talking, please jump in. Okay, so Climate Smart Communities is a program that is going across the state and looking at to provide assistance to local government leaders to reduce carbon and build resiliency. There's no fee to join. It is also not mandated. So typically the communities that are participating are larger communities that have the capacity and the bandwidth to take on doing the certification requirements. So there's a couple different levels to it. So to register as a climate smart community, and there's over 240 registered across the state. You just sign up, you essentially just sign up and you take a pledge. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you actually have to do anything. You can just pledge. The next step is really getting communities to work towards certification, which is a lot more comprehensive, and there's a lot of documentation, and they actually the state needs the communities need that capacity in order to meet those demands of becoming a certified community. So, but once a community joins, they get access to, there's webinars and workshops, there's the framing through the certification project. They also now, over the last couple of years, have access to new funding streams that are coming through the state, like Climate Smart Community grants and other opportunities that are coming down that are directed through the state, through the governor's office and the Office of Regional Economic Development. So that's something that is, obviously a motivator for small towns at the same time, a motivator for communities at the same time. It's also challenging because then the communities still have to have the resources to actually apply and write for these grants, which can be a little bit challenging, and to work on the task force. So, and again, I didn't create these slides, the state created these, so I'm pretty excited about this, that Dazzle did this. So so she's been great. So Dazzle is in the middle of this group of this photograph, and she and their office are really seeing youth as a partner to move the state forward in working with communities on climate change, and that youth really are the ones that are bringing the energy and the skill sets and the ability to help communities to work on becoming certified and to build resiliency. So they have roles that they've seen in the past. So for instance, there was a high school senior intern in Westchester County that helped the town of I can't even say it, Adirondack, to become a certified climate smart community. So they actually had the student working with the community, chasing down all of the paperwork and entering that into their certification process in order to meet those demands. And then at the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry and the Central New York Regional Planning Board, college students were getting partnered with local governments to think about how they can move towards becoming a climate smart community. So these are just some creative ideas to be thinking how to help partner communities and city governments with students, either at the high school or college level, as partners and as influencers and drivers for that climate resilience. And oftentimes these young people are coming in with the skill sets and the knowledge to like, you know, some of these small towns, like it's pretty amazing to see kind of the, you know, whether it's like antiquated computer systems or just systems in place that don't really make a lot of intuitive sense, but you have young people coming in with that suite of computer literacy and other literacies that can really help to organize around this idea of climate resilience. So the state is also really seeing students that are helping to support climate action task force. So the case study that we've been working on over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 months is with the community of Lake Placid. So this past year, we had students working in Lake Placid that were, and this was over the last like, I guess maybe 2 or 3 years, the students had been sharing their climate action plans with the community, going in and speaking to the school board, to the town board, holding events, and they really started to get noticed. They did a lot of work in particular at some of the local ski areas. So Whiteface Mountain, which is was made famous through the 1980 Olympics, Mount Van Hovenberg, which is a big cross-country ski venue. There's a lot of ice hockey, of course, like pond hockey and ice fishing. So students were going to those events and having a presence and talking about climate change with community leaders, with residents, and really kind of saying like, we really need to think about climate change and climate resilience. And then we had like a series of winters where we like basically didn't have snow after the middle of February. And usually for us, the season goes through like mid-April. So that really hit local businesses hard. And particularly in the community of Lake Placid, they lost millions of dollars in revenue within the tourism economy. So the students really, for them, climate change, it became really personal because many of them participate in these winter sports. They really value our winter culture. And so they really saw this as an opportunity to elevate the conversation about climate change and work with their local governments to pass resolutions on climate change. And that's exactly what happened. So in both the communities of Lake Placid and in Saranac Lake, this past spring, the mayors committed and the town and village board members voted on pledging to become a climate smart community. And then in addition to that, they both of those communities have committed to making sure that youth voice is a part of the planning process moving forward. So it wasn't just like this one-off thing. They were like, okay, well, the kids think it's cool, we're going to sign this. But they really wanted youth to be involved. And particularly the mayor of Lake Placid has been very vocal about kind of stepping out of the way and helping youth to lead and supporting youth leading and recognizing that that this is the future and that we really need to be planning on climate resilience. And they also see it as like this marketing thing. So Lake Placid is really striving to be this kind of seen as this green community, as a community that's leading on this in New York State, as a community that's committed to fighting climate change and reducing its carbon footprint. So so they also see it like they're coming at it from a couple of different angles. So so that has been really exciting. And then that is also kind of on a parallel track just before the town made the decision in Lake Placid to sign on to the Climate Smart Communities Pledge. Our governor signed on a pledge to commit the 3 largest ski areas that are owned by New York State, Whiteface, Gore Mountain, and Bel Air, to become 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And 2 of them, Whiteface and Gore, are already there, and they have already reached that goal in 2018. So that's kind of part of that story. And again, we're just getting started on this. You know, we've been putting a lot of groundwork in place for a while, but this is something that we really want to keep doing moving forward and sustaining this action over time. So I also wanted to share, so those were kind of Dazzle's perspective, and now I'm going to share some slides that are perspective of one of our students, Elise Pearson, who's a Lake Placid High School student leader. She's been a part of the climate program for the last couple of years. She's a lead, one of our climate leaders for the NOAA project, and she's going to be part of the presentation this coming weekend at Drawdown Learn, and she just presented with Dazzle at our Catskill Youth Climate Summit, which happened last week. So she's really taking an elevated role to talk about climate change. So just a couple of views of Lake Placid. You can see in the background, you can see the Lake Placid Public Beach. And then behind that, there's a big building with a white dome. That's the what's called the Olympic Center. So that houses like the famous 1980 rink and where Lake Placid or the U.S. defeated the Russian team. And we, again, like it's a small community of less than 3,000 people, but in the summer and winter months, you know, there can be anywhere to 30 to 50,000 people visiting. So the tourism piece is really a very important part of this community. Here are the students up on Whiteface Mountain doing a climate education event, and Elise was really a big part of making that forward. And then that's the high school behind the flags. It was built and used originally as a 1932 Olympic venue, and now it's the high school. So these are some of the communities and you can see Lake Placid is in that circle. So the registered climate smart communities, we saw that before, and that image. So this is again Elise's perspective on what you need to do in order to get a climate smart community on the ground. So from her perspective, like getting teachers online, look online, finding other people in your group to help create a roadmap so that you can go and talk to officials and know exactly what steps they must reach to take their goal, and then you have to make it all professional. And then hand it out to the town officials. So she's going to be presenting this at our summit. She just presented at the Catskill Youth Climate Summit, and she'll be doing this at Drawdown Learn. And we have other students that are going to be working on this at other sites across the state to try to, again, in partnership with New York State, so that we have that team approach. You have the adult from Dazzle from New York State and a student partnered together having these conversations. Giving tips, so that's Elise in the blue shirt, but giving tips on what town officials are most interested in, like saving money, getting on the map, having a greener community, and thinking about how the community is really paying attention to what their youth want. Again, this is Elise speaking about being specific in her ask, putting herself in the ask, giving them context, having proposals ready, and then in case you know, a student has a last minute issue, having a substitute presenter on board. And then here they are with the Lake Placid board when they decided to sign on to be a climate smart community, and here was celebrating it and staying updated. And that's their stepping stone. So they really see themselves as part of this larger task force in the community. So you're seeing this in addition to kind of the working together with the community in this intergenerational conversation. I think the other piece that you're seeing is students feeling more connected to their communities. We have a huge issue in these small rural towns, what we call brain drain. Like students grow up here, they go off to college, but they never come back. They never think about coming back. And it's a huge issue. We have a lot of small communities where schools are closing because there's no young people and young families, and it's a major struggle. And so thinking about how this eventually might help students feel more connected is something that I think about a lot. Being from here and having moved back here, and I think feeling connected to the area is really critical. But we're still getting our hands dirty. We're, again, just 1 year into our NOAA grant and probably 6 months into like really having a deeper partnership with the Office of Climate Change. And so we're excited to continue that conversation and learn and see what other communities are doing. And I also wanted to throw this up here, not throw this up here, but this was really thinking about youth being at the center of the conversation. And thanks for Frank Niepold for sharing this graphic with me. But thinking about youth being that center and how youth are working and having conversations and driving conversations with that key influential category in particular, and what that can mean towards resiliency and community engagement. So that's it. That's all I've got. Questions, comments?
Thanks, Jen.
So,
Sure.
from Jim, Jen, it's amazing, wonderful. And also a chance to look at what the Wild Center is doing. Your center overall is doing far more than museums and science centers that have 10 or 100 times the budget. And I mean, you really are doing some incredible work. And then the youth summits within that. Quite outstanding and nicely presented, nice on the website. One is intriguing is it's been our experience out here in California that youth summits, youth forums, the titles they go under are incredibly powerful and very, they're doing quite a lot to encourage them to learn from each other and stay, I don't know if it's worth creating an entire network or something. Maybe it doesn't need that kind of structure, but I certainly am going to be calling attention to what you're doing to the folks who are out here in California. There's a lot to learn from each other. There's a lot of connection, as you said, not reinventing the wheel, maybe sharing resources and everything. I think it's an important model internationally. So encouraging anything around that. I do see, for instance, I'm about to sign up for your toolkit for starting your own summit, right? Sharing that with other people if you don't mind.
Sure, please share it out. More summits, youth summits everywhere. But
yeah.
I really appreciate your comments, Jim, and I have been thinking about what that larger network looks like for a while, and I have not landed on like the perfect solution to what that might be or how that might function yet. I do but it's something I think about all the time. So anybody wants to think about that with me or strategize about that, I'd be happy to. The other piece I wanted to mention is that actually Reb and I are going to be part of a larger Institute for Museum and Library Services grant called Cyclist, which is being led by the New England Aquarium to scale up this idea around youth leadership and civic engagement through climate change and climate action with a number of zoos and aquariums across the country over the next 3 years. We just got funding for this concept, and we'll be doing youth climate summits and learning and building out some curriculum and modules around leadership and civic engagement. So I feel like there's like all these different layers to this story, and there's a lot of people working in this space that have a lot of great ideas on that engagement. And I think that intersection between young people and like this New York State or civic leaders, like I think this is something that I'm really excited to be doing a deeper dive into moving forward, because I really think that's where the action is and the potential for bold, brave, exponential change, and that we're going to need those unlikely partnerships to move forward in a transition to a low carbon economy.
That was a powerful statement there, Jen.
I've been practicing.
Kristen would be very happy.
I know.
Jen, I have a question.
Sure.
What do you think that the sort of the process was for your mayor in Lake Placid to become so awesome? Like, how did this person kind of come to realize the value of youth and in the value of letting youth lead? Do you think that was something that like you've been building that relationship and have been sort of supporting that process, or did you just get really lucky?
I think both. I think that he he had the opportunity to hear youth speak a number of times So that was the first part. There was opportunities for that intersection to happen multiple times in the course of the last few years. And so I feel like whenever those conversations and that dialogue can happen in a way that's like constructive and positive, that community leaders like mayors can have, like, they start to see youth in a completely different way. Like it's actually like they actually don't even well, this is me making a bunch of assumptions, but from my experience, limited experience, is that, we oftentimes discount like young people as active members in our society, as people that that can take on real roles and real leadership. And I think, especially like high school age, they oftentimes get kind of a little bit discounted. And so I think that when when leaders get a chance to see how young people can lead and how articulate and smart they are and how they really can have a constructive conversation with a young person, that shifts their perception and hopefully opens their sort of worldview to some extent, that young people can be part of the solution.
Thanks.
Jen, could we follow up on that a little bit more?
Sure.
So one of the things, and a lot of people on this call have already had this conversation, so I just want to dig into it a little bit more. And actually, I spoke with Nicole Ardwin at NAAEE, sorry, getting used to that, about why youth being powerfully engaged in long-term important issues that will have an impact on the future generation with the decision makers of today, there's something in that recipe that helps the older decision makers pivot their process and their thinking from more of a cost-benefit analysis kind of argument, which is a really hard one on climate to do skillfully, to a moral, we're doing the right thing, kind of almost independent of cost. And there's something about having youth involved in that process that helps adults come at this in a different way that is more action oriented in a near-term process. I don't know if that anywhere in that. I know there's literature here. Nicole feels like there is. She doesn't know what it is, and some of us have know this through practice.
Yeah.
So, we know that's there, but it's not. I don't feel like it's an actionable strategy with evidence behind it. We just know it works. And maybe there is evidence, but we got to find the evidence if we're really going to replicate it and use it and make that case powerfully to funders.
Yeah, and it's with the new IMLS grant that Reb and I are both on with New England Aquarium, New Knowledge is going to be doing the evaluation, and I think their first step is around a literature search, and like developing a literature review. And so I think that could be one space, and we'll have the opportunity to kind of help shape what that looks like. So to me, that might be an opportunity. I mean, of course, in my mind, I'm like, okay, we need that literature search yesterday, but we got to take what we can get.
And we think of that as like young people having this moral authority that they can bring to the table. And I don't know about publications on that, but I know that it was included in this report that just came out that I think got shared around on Clean from the youth perspectives on climate change from the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council to the EPA that was commissioned like 3 years ago during the the former administration, and finally was actually published this summer. And I know that is included in that report. So that's a little bit of a starting point in terms of getting it into the literature. And I'm going to chat it in.
Awesome.
Oh, thanks, Reb.
I was waiting for that.
Big undertaking. It's a how many pages is that thing? I'm trying.
99.
Yeah.
It's a beast.
99.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, we that moral authority piece is, I mean, there is something really just so rich about that concept, and we actually, one of the very, let me see if I can go back to this. I mean, speaking of moral authority, is my screen still being shared?
Yes.
Okay. Where did that slide go? So this particular image, I didn't really explain it, but we actually had youth leaders that were meeting with Pope Francis's climate change ambassadors. He actually has climate ambassadors around, at least in the U.S. And they had the opportunity to have a listening session where our leaders were talking about climate change from that moral space, and that was really, really powerful to see that conversation. And it was very, very different from kind of the the science-based, like, here are the facts space. Like, we had a little bit of that at the beginning of that day where we spent with them, but it was really thinking about and deeply speaking to that idea of that moral and social obligation, and coming at it from that human space. And so anyway, I just wanted to just mention that as that the words you said, moral authority, really resonated in this particular instance, because that's kind of where the faith-based communities are really looking at it, but also the justice community. And I think there's this perception that climate change is just an environmental problem, that it isn't cutting across all of our that it isn't a human problem or isn't a social problem. And maybe that's changing with the recent news of both Hurricane Florence and also the Hurricane Michael, and the devastation and sort of the human suffering that's kind of around that is maybe hitting people a little more close to home, at least in the US. I'm not sure, but I'd love to keep thinking and talking about that, because I think that's part of the conversation, is understanding that it's not just an environmental issue, it's a social issue. And I don't know if Placid would have acted on this and started this process if we hadn't had several years where there was a major economic impact on the community, huge economic impact. And before that, we had Hurricane Irene, which really devastated a lot of the northern rural communities in New York State and also in neighboring Vermont. So I think that there's, it's reactionary, not proactive, but I think that it's worth still exploring and thinking about where those conversation points are and how to get those conversations started with leaders and how to help support youth having those conversations.
Jen, this is Marta. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I came very late to this. It looks like an amazing presentation. Do you probably know about the book Moral Ground, or do you know about it?
No.
I'll send you that link for everybody, because it's a wonderful book that comes from all different kinds of religious perspectives all over the world in terms of climate change. So it might be a resource.
Okay, thank you, Marta.
Sure.
Jim here. So just commenting on the important things that Frank is bringing up, many people say doing important stuff, is I would think there's several tracks in approaching, with funders and everything. There is one track is that the evidence of what is already happening specifically to climate change, of course. I think the youth summits are very high in the list of look at the effect they're having, look at what they're doing. An example, of course, is the kids' lawsuits and so on, and the attention that is getting. I mean, that's front page news and having an effect. There is how people respond to your children and grandchildren. I mean, these are, I know I'm not saying anything original. It's just sort of in framing it that another one is of course historical, right? That what has happened if one has failed to listen to the youth or look at what the youth has happened. The 60s, the Vietnam War. There's things where major changes happened when younger people look at the effect they have, of course. And I think there's a perspective from funders. Funders historically understand the need to reach the younger audience. I mean, it's not like people with money don't get it that you change society by going to the younger demographic. I mean, there's for good and bad. There's a thing. And finally, maybe kind of a negative one. And I know I don't want to lead with this one. I learned not to do that, Frank. You're good about making sure you go with the positive and the strong thing first. But if there's any doubt about how important youth are to climate change, look at the money industries that do not want climate change getting to youth have spent. If you want to trace out the money that the American Petroleum Institute has spent to try to affect education on climate change, it's quite extensive, and it's gone way back. It's understood by others that young people are important, and you want to influence that. So.
But, Jim, I totally appreciate what you just said, but one of the things that I'm wondering is that the youth as the moral agent on this is one thing, but then the response of that to the decision maker. I mean, Jen, you kind of laid out an ecosystem of reasons why this was moving forward, but I think understanding that more, tactically is about the social response from the shift in frame, right? And that there was a program that they could act on. Right? It wasn't just because that program that they knew what they could do and it was actionable, they could get resources, support, and move it forward. They had rationale. But the thing that I think just unpacking that a little bit more is kind of what the case study was about. Also, did you point out where the case studies are in your presentation?
I did not actually. You
right,
go right ahead.
I'll take care of it. But I think just taking it all the way, its logic to its end goal, which was actually the community becoming climate smart. And that just getting to the decision is only part of the process. Then the actually doing of that is the other part.
And it's not a short process, and it's not easy. And the certification piece is the Climate Smart Communities program, and there's other programs that other states have done throughout across the country, and they're all different, but they're all try to this end goal to move towards more resiliency. But without funding coming at it from the state level, those communities, like our communities here, can't necessarily support big changes. I mean, they're doing a lot already, but they will need to apply for grants, and they need to do a whole pile of other things, which will all take, that's going to take years.
Right. And just so you guys see, I put in the website, which was for the workshop that we were at in San Francisco. Then below that is the actual case study that we developed for the workshop that focused on the Wild Center's work.
Yeah. I also wanted to chime in here on this was a great presentation, Jen, and I do really think these case studies have such great value for people. One of our partners here at Series Western Water Assessment, they work with communities a lot, and the communities say, how do we do this? And they want to see examples. They don't want academics to say, here are your list of examples. And I know that's community work and this is youth work, but I think it's very similar to envision how this could look. It's fantastic to have these case studies. So thanks for putting this together, Jen, and for your great work, and Frank and everyone.
Thanks, Anna.
I think we should feature them on Clean more prominently, as just linking to them to say here, these are if you want to see a vision lived, this is how it works.
This is getting to that idea of making solutions visible.
Yep.
So that's my new thing too. Go ahead, Frank. You've been trying to jump in there for a while.
No, it's okay. But if there's any feedback on the specifics of the case studies, we're really interested in hearing about them. A couple of the features that are emphasized in here is the pull quotes from community leaders and people who are participating in the program, whichever one it is. But it takes a little bit of time to really get the right one. And the thing on the one that Jen, and actually we built the case study around Jen and Lake Placid's work because we wanted to figure it out somewhere where education was crucial to communities' climate action, and that there were leaders who would testify through their quotes that was true. And so if you scroll down in this, you can see what's the first quote in this one? Jen, this is your screen, right?
Yeah, this is my screen. It's a Lake Placid.
Right, so it's the mayor. The first poll quote is the mayor and the village board member. And then Dazzle and Mark from the climate change office in the state of state of New York. You know, this quote here is from them. And to get them to put their name behind this statement related to an education program, that's a big deal. So I think we're starting to make progress at that. Do leaders in these communities leading climate action see the value and benefit of educational programming? And the answer is yes. And so we only have 6 so far. We have some more that are likely to come, but just know that I think this is a very powerful tool for helping people who are really trying to lead climate action in our country understand that there are educational investments and activities and programs that are very important to that work. So just, know there's only 6 so far, but it doesn't mean that we're stopping. Just it's a capacity issue. So if anyone who's listening beyond today or today who has an idea of something where that a program and a community intersect in this way, more than happy to work with you to try and figure out how to replicate this case study set. So Anna, you're starting a new grant, and down the road, you're probably going to be able to do this work, if not already, and there's others people on the call as well. So just, it's an open ask.
And this is Marta, and we're for A2A, Awareness to Action, the project we're on. Is one thing that we're looking at is how can people from different disciplines access each other more efficiently and effectively. And we're kind of looking at, just as a beginning step, is looking at websites that have case studies and how intuitive are they for navigating through to find a kind of information that you might want to find. And Jen, I'd love to maybe send you this, or whoever is interested, this little homework assignment. We're looking at Clean as a website, and also Arts Place, and also Curating Cities, which has a database of science, art, sustainability collaborations. And because what we're finding is that, this work, Jen, that you're doing is just phenomenal, and it's so great, and so is Art Place, and so are other folks. But people who aren't already within a particular field have so little time to actually do any research, to read through the whole thing. So what kind of first stop, first kiss can there be to help people find each other? So maybe I can just send you this, if that would be okay.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I know we're at right at the top of the hour, and I really appreciate everybody's thoughtful remarks and perspectives and contributions to the conversation. Like I said, this is we're early on this, and we're hoping that there's some long-term sustainability and engagement and thinking more succinctly about what's the recipe for having young people and intersecting and partnering with civic leaders and government agencies to help those conversations move forward and the action to move forward. It's really about leveraging this action and looking for those unlikely partners to move towards on a strong path towards climate resiliency. So thanks everybody, and I guess we'll chat next week.
Great.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Jen.
Thanks everybody.
Bye,
Thanks
guys.
for being the first case study there, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Frank.
Of course.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.